can end up in a very bad situation. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at doing. The primary goal is to offer insight and in-depth look at the complex nature of public safety while encouraging productive discussions and positive community engagement. The mayor called me the other day and we talked about implicit bias. Our department has done training on that, but again, it's one of these topics that's in the news that is somewhat controversial and people don't understand it. So these kinds of issues, we just want to create a forum for open discussion where citizens can get to know us and we can get to know them. So that's kind of a basic overview of what the academy is. It's going to be 8 weeks on Wednesday night. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be more than willing to answer.
Does anyone have any questions?
Chief,
Yeah.
are people going to have to register or sign up for this, or is it kind of come as you
Yeah,
can?
there's going to, we waited to do the presentation tonight, and then we'll put out a little public notice, and then they'll have to sign a waiver. There's no fee or anything like that. We want to try and train our residents first so they get firsthand knowledge of their public safety department. So that information will be coming out.
Are you asking people to commit to trying to come to all of the programs, or if someone's just interested in a particular week's session, just come to that one? How are you doing?
Yeah, what we really want to do is try and have maybe 10 people and give them a comprehensive understanding of what we do. We feel that's the best way to do it, and that's what they've done in other cities where they've had successful police academies for their residents. We really want them to get to know us and give them an in-depth understanding of what we do and why we do it.
And we'll do this on a more regular basis, so more than 10 people will have an opportunity if we do it annually or whatever we can accommodate. My husband did this with the Kent County Sheriff's Department, and it was probably 10 plus years ago. He still talks about it all the time. He learns so much. I think that this is a great program, and I really appreciate you and the officers putting it together. And I think you're right. If people just came for one or two of these, they wouldn't get really the feeling of what the department's really about. And that's what we're trying to do, is foster that understanding, that foster one or two subjects. And because it's limited, we couldn't have 100 people in this group that wouldn't have the same impact. We certainly want anyone that's going to do this to commit to doing it for the full 8 weeks, or at least 7 out of the 8.
Right.
Is the camera working now?
Yes.
It is, okay. So I just want to, for those of you that might be watching that didn't hear the announcement because we had some camera trouble, want to just give like a one paragraph overview again?
Sure,
Thank you.
Yeah, the Public Safety Department at the end of September, we're going to be conducting an 8-week Citizens Public Safety Academy with the primary goal of having our officers educate probably 10 residents on what we do at the Public Safety Department. Our main aspect being, cover the police, fire, medical first response, but also touch on key issues that affect the community, such as use of force, traffic issues, those kinds of things, to give them a really good understanding of what the Public Safety Department does and what our role is in the community and how we develop a good relationship with the community.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
I just am excited. I was excited when I hear about team members bringing an idea to the chief and having a good conversation, and us coming up with an idea for continuous improvement through direct dialogue with our community members. And I think it's a very exciting thing to see. And, look forward to seeing more information out there and people that commit to it. And who knows, we have to do a couple of these a year. But I think more importantly, it's a direct opportunity to make sure that we've got the right concerns coming up before bad things can happen.
Yeah, we're kind of considering this first one kind of a test
dry run.
Yeah, dry run. Iron out the
Keep
kinks.
getting better and better. And,
Yeah.
You might find one session was amazingly good, another was not so good, so you just keep adjusting.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay, next item on the agenda is introduction of an ordinance to amend section 5.7, 5.10, 5.14 of chapter 50, etc. Alec Mizikar presenting. And John, are we doing these one at a time, each one individually?
Each ordinance individually,
Yes.
I should point out several of them, multiple
Overlap.
sections.
Yeah, thank you.
So they're all broken apart, but I figured they're all kind of associated together, so I'll be talking about them all together.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, so one of the short-term master plan goals that we have is to amend the zoning ordinance to allow for an expanded table of uses for C1 commercial district and definition of retail. especially for high pedestrian uses, including opportunity for office space and hotel land use. So the Planning Commission over the past 3 months has been reviewing this and looking into it, and what we have now is their proposed amendments for you guys. So I'll briefly go over the bullet list that I have in the memo, and then we can go through each specific ordinance in detail afterwards. So the first one, I'll start with section 5.36. That's the actual schedule of uses. So that lists out which uses are permitted or need a special land use in the C1 district. So looking at existing uses changing from needing special use approval to being permitted by right. One of them is second floor residential, professional and medical offices, and then radio and television broadcasting stations. And then addition of new uses that aren't listed on the table would be ground floor residential, product showrooms, and similar mixed office showroom type uses, and then hotels and bed and breakfasts. So that's the kind of the main section of what we're looking at, and then everything else are associated with that schedule of uses. So section 5.7, 5.10, and 5.15 would be adding new definitions, because the zoning ordinance currently doesn't have definitions for hotel, bed and breakfast, and product showroom. Section 5.65 is the hours of operation. So that's adding in that hotels can obviously operate 24 hours a day. Office uses, adding new rules for the addition of product showroom regulations. And then section 5.74, adding new regulations for the addition of ground floor residential regulations, revising the second floor residential regulations, and the addition of hotels and bed and breakfast regulations. Now, on the second page of your memo, I included 2 charts just to kind of give you a snapshot of what we have in Gaslight Village currently. So the first one looking at the just the number of businesses in each kind of category, and the second one looking at square footage. So if anyone has any questions, I can answer that now, or I can just go right into the specific zoning ordinance.
I think I'll have questions when we get into each specific.
Yeah, let's go forward with that and then we'll
Okay.
ask questions. Thank you.
Yep, and John, do we need to have a vote of any sort after each one to move on to a public hearing for the next meeting, or should?
We should, each one has to be introduced, and they have to be voted to do that. And public hearing after
Okay, well, I'm
To me.
gonna just change my mind because I can't. I do have some, so we don't have Commissioner Miller here, and he's the one that sits on our planning commission, and John Barber, who is the head of the planning commission, wasn't able to make it tonight. Can you tell me some general conversations that were had? So I know that this was something that we had in the master plan, and they have done some really great in-depth work on this. Can you tell me sort of maybe the major overview of the conversations that were had, the reason for doing it, and
Yeah, so I think they're really excited about opening up the types of uses, with the changing economy, with brick and mortar retail not dying, but evolving. They're looking at how to have complementary uses to fill gaps where that retail economy is evolving and changing. I think that was kind of the overall conversation that we had in all our meetings.
yeah, thank you. And I think that that's important for us to remember as we're looking at this and thinking about it, which is also why we continue to get a master plan through the years, because things do evolve, things do change, and things that made perfect sense 10 years ago don't necessarily make sense now. So, yeah, that's good. Thank you. And as you're presenting these, if there's some major points that they made during their conversations, if you could bring those forward, that would be helpful.
Will do.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, specifics then?
All right.
Thank you.
So looking at the new definitions, I'm sure you've all had a chance to read through them before the meeting. Does anyone have any specific questions on these 3 definitions? Or would you like me to read through all of them?
Good? No?
They're pretty, I think,
Good.
straightforward.
Yep, thank you.
All right, so the next one would be section 5.36. This is the actual schedule of uses. And so I've listed in red ink where changes are located. So the first one would be under residential, changing the above ground floor of a commercial building from special land use to permitted by right. So that went from an S to a P. So that means now, I know a few months back, we had someone come in for a special land use approval for an apartment above on the second floor, so now that would just be a permitted use by right. And then the planning commission was also interested in expanding that and actually looking at residential on the ground floor as well. They did, I'll mention it once we get to section 5.74, but they were interested in having that ground floor or the residential on the ground floor as a special land use approval. It's not permitted by right, doesn't even come in for special land use approval. And then there would be additional regulations such as it can't be on the front of the building, it has to be located in the back. That would to maintain still that retail character in the front of the building. So moving on from residential into services. Just some housekeeping, we moved barber or beauty shop down to included with other similar uses, so that way it's not its own separate thing, it's included with similar uses. And the addition of private sports and recreation instructional facilities, that was added, but one could argue that it could fall under health clubs and fitness centers, but this just calls it out, so now it's more specific. And then we added hotels, including bed and breakfast. Now this would be a special land use approval with additional requirements in section 5.74D. And that was in the master plan as well. And then some more housekeeping, we moved other uses to the end of the table, just because usually other is located at the end of something. And then really the biggest changes came in offices. So I know we also had a special land use approval request come in a few months ago for the State Farm business that moved location to Gaslight, and since they were on the ground floor, they had to come in for special use approval. So one of the changes was changing those types of professional offices from a special use approval to a permitted use by right. So now they don't have to come in for special use approval. And also medical offices, physicians, dentists, psychologists, etc. are now also permitted use by rights. And the Planning Commission also included non-boarding veterinary services with no outside uses. So that means that you can't have dogs and cats or animals stay overnight, and there's no use outside, but they can still have an office there if they wanted to. And the addition of product showrooms and similar mixed office with product display uses, that's listed as a permitted use by right on the ground floor and above ground floor. And last but not least, two more things. Serviced offices was changed from requiring a special land use approval on above ground floor to permitted use by right. So these are offices that can be rented out for a week or a month to anybody, that sort of thing. And then last but not least, the radio and television broadcasting stations was changed from special land use approval to permitted use by right. Any questions? I can move into the additional requirements.
I just wondering to the extent these changes got review and input from our planning consultant, Mr. LeBlanc, and his team.
Correct, yes, staff were working with Mr. LeBlanc on these changes.
So that process is already done,
Yes,
essentially?
correct, after, in preparation for each meeting, and then afterwards, staff would, like myself, would work with Paul on any changes or questions that the planning commission had, and come back to the next meeting with information as we went through that process over 3 months.
Okay.
Move on. Section 5.65, hours of operation. So as mentioned before, this was just adding the caveat that hotels and bed and breakfast are allowed to operate 24 hours a day. Moving on to section 5.72, this is additional requirements for office uses. In subsection A, this is changing language, whereas before it required a special land use approval, it's now permitted use by right. So changing the wording there. Similar requirements, but it allows now staff to, for parking requirements, there are sections of Gaslight that are exempt from parking, but there are sections that aren't. So Article 9 of the zoning ordinance lays out the parking requirements for all uses. And so listed under A, B, C, and D, similar for a special land use approval, if say an office doesn't have the room for parking on their property, if any of these A, B, C, or D are met and brought with their application or building permit application, staff could approve that in lieu of their parking requirements. And then subsection 4 was eliminated as it was no longer applicable. And then we added subsection C for the new product showrooms and similar mixed office with product display uses. And so they had the planning commission had lots of discussion on these requirements, as this is going to be a new called out use in the schedule of uses. So I'll just go through each one of these one by one. First one is must be open during regular business hours at a minimum 5 days a week for at least 5 continuous days or hours a day. The planning commission had concerns that the showrooms might just be appointment only, or only be open for a few hours a day, or maybe just 1 day a week. So they wanted to still have open hours to maintain that kind of retail character feel, to make sure that they're still engaging the sidewalk and pedestrian access.
Would anything in existence today, like a showroom that didn't pull those hours, they'd be grandfathered in? or-
Correct, yes. So any new business would have to follow these rules. Must allow walking customers, not just by appointment. A minimum of 70% of the street facade or street-facing facade on the ground level must contain display windows that allow outside pedestrians to see into the building. This would also be for any existing use would be grandfathered, but if they were to want to remodel, they would have to abide by these new regulations. And that's just to allow for, to maintain that retail character. If associated fleet service vehicles are to be parked on site, they must either be parked inside a building or must be screened so that they are not visible from the street right of way. And the square footage of office space must be equal to or lesser than the square footage of display and storage areas. So that's also to maintain a feel of retail character, so that way it's just not all offices with one little display case.
So, any questions on that section? That's a lot.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the biggest ones, so.
Yeah.
I've been saving some comments kind of towards should we have some comments post-motion being presented, or do you want some
We can do that
discussion
too, but
right now?
if, I think some discussion right now wouldn't be a bad thing if
Uh,
we're talking about this specifically.
And can we reiterate a little bit of our planned timeline here? You had mentioned that Commissioner Miller's mentioned here, a couple of others. I mean, I think that normally there are certain instances where we will introduce a new amendment to an ordinance, and then immediately, the 2 weeks later, we might finalize that ordinance. But are we going to plan on sticking with that timeline here with different vacation schedules and so forth?
The plan, looking at vacation, et cetera, we're going to look at this at our first meeting in September. I believe we currently have full attendance, and that also provides for additional time for any additional feedback from the public as well.
I certainly think time for feedback would be good. I mean, this is a pretty big move. This was certainly a big part of our master plan to make sure we continue to move ahead. So I'm glad to see that we're taking action on this. I know there's probably a few out there that wish this would have gone faster, but you get a better product when you put the right time into it. But more specifically, I guess with this section, I'm just continuing to, I guess, what I'd like to happen over the next couple of weeks. I don't think how far into detail we want to go right now, but is the required parking spaces. I think it'd be helpful for the entire commission to understand which areas do require, which one don't. You mentioned there are some that's applicable to and it's not. I think the further clarification, understanding what those differences are before we finalize this ordinance, I think would be certainly helpful for us.
Yeah, if I could even pull up the map at our next meeting and kind of circle and highlight areas where.
That'd be great. I'm sorry I didn't get to you sooner to be able to do
No
it
problem.
tonight. I think this is a good time to kind of talk through that, and once again, kind of maybe understand a little better about what this means. I mean, I would say there's an abundance of real estate in Gaslight for people to start providing parking to their employees. I know I'm certainly one of those people that has challenges with that, so I'm greatly appreciative of the addressing product showrooms. I know that's been a point of confusion in the past. I think it's extremely important that we maintain activated storefronts. That was when I was president of the Business Association. We first put a version of this ordinance on the books. That was always our biggest concern and why it started, but it was obviously we've got to continue to evolve and make sure we continue to get what we're looking for. So I think those are my 2 main points for now, but I think the parking will it continues to kind of hit a couple of points in here, so I think that'll be an important part of our conversation for the next couple of meetings, certainly before we finalize. So thank you for all your work on this.
Okay, continue.
Moving on. All right, this would be the last section, section 5.74, regulations on residential uses. And so we did a lot of crossing out of subsection B, as we're now allowing dwellings on the street level. And then we crossed out the one on-site parking space. The planning commission didn't feel that was a necessary requirement, and so they wanted to cross that out. And then we added subsection C, residential dwellings on the ground floor in a commercial building. So the first one is dwelling unit shall not occupy any space along the front of a commercial building except for the entry door and hallway leading towards the dwelling. So the planning commission didn't want to see the dwelling in the front of the building, but they were okay with doors in the front of the building with the hallway leading towards the back. And the entire width of the building, except for the entry door and associated hallway of the dwelling along any street frontage, must be occupied by a non-residential use otherwise allowed in the C1 district. And the last is the addition of the hotels and bed and breakfast establishments. A parking plan must be submitted with the applicant's site plan during the special land use approval process. This parking plan shall include at the minimum at least one dedicated parking spot for 75% of the available rooms. So say bed and breakfast had 4 rooms they wanted to rent out, they would need 3 parking spots.
All right, any questions on this section?
Yeah, further clarification, similar topic. I think when you talk about certainly bed and breakfast, it doesn't seem like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, but I think when we talk about, and certainly we see drawings in our master plan about maybe a more boutique type hotel that may take a few more employees. We've had conversations here about the difficulties some people who work in Gaslight have parking. So is it the intent, kind of coming out of the Planning Commission, that the one dedicated parking spot for 75% of the available rooms would be enough for turnover of people renting rooms as well as to be able to cover all the employees?
Yes, we did have lots of discussion on this requirement. They did toy with the idea of having dedicated parking for employees, but they ultimately decided not to include that. They thought that it's best to leave up to the individual business to see if it could fit their business model.
We also, our planning consultant also talked about some other codes that are similar to this language, but actually maybe a little bit of a higher percentage, and there was a little bit of resistance to that, just given the opportunity for ride sharing and transit and some other things too that maybe may impact or guests of people residents that live in the city too. So they were really kind of had a discussion about those different things in the future as well. Ultimately, I think they looked at 80% or
80%.
moved down to 70, and I think they split it at 75 is where, and we discussed it at several meetings, but that's ultimately where they kind of landed there.
And so we had, once again, back to Commissioner Walter's question earlier, we had our expert kind of really weigh in on this and give us a good range to be talking about. And we felt confident that we'd be able to cover employees as part of this as well. Correct. Thank you.
Before we go to making the motions, any other questions about any of these? I wanted to make a comment, to anyone who may be listening or anyone in the audience, a reminder that we're talking about C1, right?
Commercial,
C1 district,
correct.
which is the commercial. So when we're talking about bed and breakfast, we're not talking about in somebody's home in the neighborhood. We're just talking about in the C1 district.
Correct, and I believe we only have one single-family style house in the C1 district as of right now.
So, what may come in the other areas, we don't know, but at this point, we've just been working on the C1. Anyone else have any questions?
No, I want to reiterate, I know this is not an easy task. I want to thank the staff for all the work. I mean, the bottom line is continue to keep Gaslight convenient for our residents, and have a streamlined process for businesses. We've had a couple of things come up here that have said that maybe we could be a little easier to do business with. So I think this is direct reflection of us working to be very business friendly and be easier to do business with and help people get their business moving faster.
And as a result, did we specifically solicit input from the Gaslight Village Business Association? are these the right things? Are there anything that we're missing that they'd like us to look at in the future?
I was able to sit in on a board meeting recently, and I would anticipate further comment coming as part of our review process, which is part of my question asking at the time.
Good, that's what we want, yeah. Excellent. And also, not only did city staff do a lot of really good work on this, but the planning commission, they really do the yeoman's work, right? They slog through this stuff, and we have some great, citizen engagement there, and so they go through this and bring us things to react to when they have a lot of this in-depth conversation. So I really appreciate their input on this. It's not just coming willy-nilly.
I'm sorry, what was the timeline again? You said the first September meeting?
Yeah, I think it'll be September 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be a Tuesday, the day after the.
Yes.
So there's still plenty of time for.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we did reach out to the GBBA, and we've, I don't know if the notices have gone out yet, but we're sending out round notices to choose a reminder to solicit that feedback as well.
And it also, if something came up and somebody was upset with something, or we wanted more information, we can always table it, get more information. We don't have to approve or not approve on that. right?
Correct, yeah.
We can continue
It's
to work on it.
listed in our short-term goals, which is listed as 1 to 3 years, so we're pretty good. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. Okay, so we'll go through each one individually.
Need some motions then? So
Yes,
start
yes, sir.
there. All right, I'll move to introduce the ordinance to amend sections 5.7, 5.10, and 5.14 per agenda item number 6.
Support. Thank you. Any comments? Alec, I think that you can sit down, I think. But you'll be there if we have
Yeah,
questions.
you'll be there a
right?
while.
All right, any comments on that motion? Okay, so this is to introduce it. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. May I have a motion for number 7?
Motion to introduce the ordinance to amend section 5.36 of chapter 15, title 5, city code pertaining to the schedule of uses in the C1 commercial district.
Support. Any questions on this item? Okay, all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. And agenda item 8. Please have-
Motion to introduce ordinance to amend the section 5.65 of chapter 50 of title 5 of the city code pertaining to hours of operation in C1 commercial district.
Support. All right, any comments? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Okay, number 9, we seem to be going down the line. Commissioner Fowler, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. Motion to introduce an ordinance to amend section 5.72 of chapter 50 of title 5 of the city code pertaining to office uses in the C1 commercial district.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Okay, and I'd like one more motion, please.
Motion to introduce section, the ordinance to amend section 5.74 of chapter 15, title 5 of the city code pertaining to residential uses in the C1 commercial district.
Support.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, and thank you for all the work. Hope we continue to get information, input, and chat a little bit to you, because you are in close contact with that group, so thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is introduction of an ordinance to amend Article 1, Chapter 83, Title 8 of the City Code regarding general fence requirements. And Doug, is that you?
I think Alex is gonna
Alex,
take it, but I
sorry.
will jump in and
All
I'll
right.
break in.
All right. Yeah, it said Doug on here, but we can let Al.
So we'll be introducing amendments to defense ordinance. This is brought up, the Mayor and City Commission requests that the Infrastructure Committee review defense ordinance after a variance was approved for a fence a few months ago. The Infrastructure Committee met 3 times, and the amendments in front of us are what we concluded at. So I've included a bulleted list of kind of the overview, and then we can go through the actual language afterwards. So the first one would be in section 8.61.a, and so fences or walls located in a side or rear yard. This change here is how it's being measured. So whereas before we're measuring from the actual grade below the fence to the most top part of the fence, so to speak, now it's being changed to measuring from the bottom of the fence, so the actual physical part of the fence, to the uppermost portion of the sections in between the support post or pillars, so pretty much the panels. And then we decided to allow a gap no larger than 6 inches is allowed between the natural grade and the bottom of the fence to allow for uneven grade. As staff, I'm the one that actually goes out and has to, do the permits and measure everything, so I think this is a time to really, things that kind of make my job more difficult, so the earth's not even, so it's, a lot of times a fence may have a short gap where you can't put panels down there, so actually putting something in the ordinance to allow that, I think would be great. And then we also decided to allow a 12-inch height encroachment for decorative elements on posts. I've noticed that lots of people like to have a decorative cap or some sort of decorative element on their post. Doesn't really obstruct vision, and in the old ordinance, technically that would be above the height requirement, as we'd be measuring to the very most top part of the fence. So the infrastructure committee thought that an encroachment for decorative elements would be appropriate. Should I keep going to the next section, or should we talk about each one as we go? Keep going?
Yep. Yeah, I think we talk about all of it together at the end.
Okay. Yep. Next section, subsection B. This is looking at fences in the front yard to better accommodate requirements for pools and for standard sizing at fence manufacturers and wholesalers. The infrastructure committee decided to change the height requirement from not to exceed 36 inches or 3 feet to now 48 inches or 4 feet, measured the same way as mentioned before, and shall be no more than 50% opaque, as was before, for the sections of fence or wall in between support post or pillars. And then also a gap no larger than 6 inches allowed between the grade and the bottom of the fence, with the encroachment for decorative elements as well. And subsection C is looking for at corner lots. The changes there would be allowing the 4-foot instead of the 3-foot fence within that 10-foot setback requirement, measured the same way. And then the fence amendments that we had about a year, less than a year ago, included the clear vision areas now for fences. And so that ordinance amendment had no fence in there, or if any fence in there must be quote-unquote see-through. In practicing that after we passed the amendment, we ran into some problems with people now having to angle their fences and having to come up with goofy alternatives now, and it just didn't really seem right. So we decided to just have it be the same as in the front yard with no more than 50% opaque. And then we also changed section 3.38 in chapter 32, looking at trees and shrubs where the clear vision ordinance is located. The infrastructure committee decided to change that clear vision zone by the driveway from 20 foot by 20 foot to 10 foot by 10 foot. So in the corner of the lot, it would still be 20 foot by 20 foot where the sidewalks intersect. But at the driveway, it would be reduced to 10 foot by 10 foot. Staff looked at a few different other communities. It really didn't seem to be like there was a common dimension. Grand Rapids does 10 foot by 10 foot at the driveway, so it would be similar to Grand Rapids, but there really wasn't a universal dimension for that. And then looking at subsection D, one question I get a lot is, so we allow for basic repair and maintenance, so the question I always get is, well, how much can I tear off then? And still be repair and maintenance. So we wanted to include language that actually defines what is repair and maintenance. So we decided on repair and maintenance are defined as replacing no more than 20% of a section of non-conforming fence within a 12-month time frame.
25%.
Correct.
25%.
Of
Yep. You just said
25,
wrong.
oh, I'm sorry, 25%, correct. Just of the section of non-conforming fence, so not 25% of the entire fence, but just the area that is non-conforming. We believe that was a large enough percentage to allow for basic repair. And then skipping all the way to subsection L, which deals with exceptions and variances for fences. City Attorney Huff suggested that we do what we do in the sign ordinance. So whereas before in the fence ordinance, we refer to the zoning ordinance for exceptions and variances. We decided now to include that language in the fence ordinance itself. So similar as we do in the sign ordinance, we would now have the process and standard of review here in the fence ordinance. So it'd be a whole separate procedure. It'd be done basically the same way, but now it's listed in the fence ordinance. So we did add 2 new sections, section 8.62.a and section 8.62.b. And .a is looking at basically just saying that who the Board of Appeals are, how you can do an appeal, the interpretation process, very simple. It's pretty much the exact same language as what's in the sign ordinance, so nothing's really changing. Really, what's changing the most would be under variances. Section 2 under there, the City Commission shall use the following standards to determine if a variance is warranted. All of the following standards shall be satisfied as applicable. So these would be the standards that or the Board of Appeals, which would be the City Commission, would be looking at when hearing a request for a fence exception. And I figured we should go through each one of these, as these are kind of probably the most important. The first one would be the applicant has demonstrated a variance is needed due to a particular difficulty on the site or unique condition that is more than mere inconvenience. A variance is warranted due to circumstances exceptional and peculiar to the property for which the variance is requested, and those conditions do not exist generally throughout the city. The variance will not be a hazard to either clear vision or overall safety and will be harmonious with the surrounding environment. If applicable, a variance would significantly bring a non-conforming fence closer to conformity with the chapter, and the variance will not be contrary to the purpose and intent of the regulations being considered for the variance. And then section 8.62 or 8.62.b is the same language as it's similar in the zoning ordinance. So really the process that we're going to be doing is going to be exactly the same. It's just those standards of review that would be changing. And then we did include chapter 32, section 3.38 as well. The red ink is where the change would be, changing the 20-foot by 20-foot clear vision driveway to 10-foot by 10-foot. And we include the new illustration to help with that. So if there are any questions, happy to answer.
Yes.
Do we want to do them now versus after the introduction? Probably doesn't really matter in this case, whether there's only one motion versus.
Yeah, I think there's only one motion. So if you have questions for Alec, I think now you can maybe ask Alec for questions.
Okay. I was curious about the change from the 3-foot to 4-foot for the height there. There was this comment about standard. This brings it in line with what standard size fencing would be. Was that an important factor in terms of what was driving that? If that the 3-foot fences would be custom ordered fences, and that was a problem for?
I don't think it was the most important factor, but it was mentioned. I know lots of people who want to come in for fence permits. I do get people wanting to put 4-foot fences in their front yard, and it's not usually a big deal. You know, they'll do the 3-foot, but people do ask about it. And it would address, you have problems with pools requiring 4-foot fences, and so now no one would ever have to come in for a variance or exception for a fence for a pool.
If it's a 4-foot fence.
Correct.
So I have several questions, and it might be that my fellow commissioners that sat on this will be able to help out, or you can let me know what the conversation was around it. So this is our 3rd attempt at this in a few years, 3rd version of this?
Yes, I believe this is the first time you're referring to would be 2015. About right, and the second time would be a little less than a year ago, and then right now.
So I'm concerned because when Commissioner Zagel asked that this be looked at after our last, the variance hearing regarding a person that had a pool fence, and it was granted large variances, and so he requested that we go back and take a look at this and bring it back. So I am wondering, those things in that variance that was granted don't seem to be addressed here, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's some clarification. But the last variance that was given was they were allowed a 6-foot fence, not the 4-foot that you're talking about. And the vision triangle was not 10 feet. I don't remember what it was, 3 feet?
It was 7.5 feet by 5.5 feet.
Okay, all right. And the, and it was a new fence, and it was not even a foot back, and this is requesting 10 feet back. So I thought that this would be looking at why we gave those types of leeway to that fence. Because there was a pool, and so she needed to be 6 feet, and because it was a pool, so it could be right up next to the sidewalk. And so I'm just trying to see how this ordinance changes enough to make it that other ordinance makes sense. So I'm just trying to understand that, and I'm probably not stating that well.
Well, I think, the intent, anytime that we can make things, I don't think anybody wants to put a family through what a certain family had to go through to get a project done. So I think that that's kind of the key piece here is for us as a commission to say, well, what standards do we want to hold the entire community to, and have we made the process easier for our residents?
Right.
And I guess that's just, I certainly would appreciate continued conversation. I think that there's certainly some things that could potentially, from a 20-foot clear vision area to a 10-foot, okay, I see that's might be something that can make things easier for our residents. And if staff and the infrastructure committee felt that's still something that's safe, great. I think I heard some language, certainly, well, it was there before, and we had lots of pictures presented to us about lots of fences that were up in our community that, I guess the conversation, I'm just curious if there was a conversation about whether or not we should grandfather in existing fences. I don't know if we should or not. I just would appreciate, I guess some insight. Now, I don't know if in section 8.62.a, going down to subsection B as in dog, D2, and all the way down to D again, if applicable, a variance would significantly bring a non-conforming fence closer to conformity with this draft. Is that what we're saying? If it's anything better than what was there, then there's justification to grant a variance? Am I interpreting that language correctly?
That would be how you can interpret this.
Okay. So I guess, once again, I'm with the mayor in the sense that we have a lot to get done with safety in our community and a lot of other things. I don't think us going through fence ordinances every 6 months is a good idea. So I don't think any one commission up here appreciates going through all this as well. So I think, let's just all work together here to see what do we think is the best and what do we think we can stick with. So I guess it's just looking for just a little insight. And then I guess for clarification on this particular, once we introduce this, we'll introduce this tonight. We'll have potentially some time period to get some resident feedback, some further staff feedback if necessary, any other conversations that need to happen, and we'll finalize this at the next city commission meeting. Is that an appropriate timeline, or are we going to go 2 out on this one as well?
I guess my intent would be to move this out to the September 3rd meeting, knowing
Okay.
that we have full
So
attendance.
also, okay, so that gives us the same amount of time period again, so that we've got a good time period for us all to have another meeting of potential conversations, get any questions, maybe more data provided at the next meeting if necessary, and then further conversations. So I guess, once again, I'm just trying to, I don't want to put a family through what a family went through in Grand Rapids again. And I just want to know we've got something that we all feel we can stick with, and that not only, it makes sense for the next commission, and it supports the staff and the work that they do for us day to day. And I appreciate your comments, Alec, on, hey, I would really appreciate if we had this in here to make my life a little bit easier, because we need to know that. I constantly ask every one of the directors, what is it that your team needs from us? And this is very good direct feedback for us to make sure you have what you need. So I've talked enough, I've spoken enough, so I'll finish it.
And I just want to follow up with that. Some of the things I remembered from that previous conversation, and that was the right way to state it. It's we don't want all of these to be difficult. I thought we were going to clarify this. Because one of the biggest talking points was, it's a pool, it's an attractive nuisance, people will see the pool, they'll want to get in the pool, so we want to make sure that from the street around a pool, we allow a 6-foot fence. But this, I believe, says a 4-foot fence for
Within that 10-foot setback.
within that 10-foot setback. So that doesn't, I mean, that goes against what it was that we granted, so I don't feel like we solved that problem. I think that problem of an attractive nuisance would still be there. And then the grandfathering issue, which seemed to be part of that as well, and perhaps I'm wrong, but that's, I mean, if there were conversations about it, I'd like to know what the conversations were, because I feel like if that same request was brought back with this new one in place, that we would still have a lot of the same comments. I don't think that that would be necessarily rectified, so I'm concerned about that.
Well, if I could just raise,
I'd love to hear it. We want to. Thank you. Yeah.
I don't think this is the meeting to go whole hog into it, but, and I know we'll have more conversation about this, but I just did want to point out that part of the issue that made the last one so complicated and uncomfortable for everybody was the process of obtaining a fence permit. And that there was different ways of looking how that process unfolded. Unless you were there, you didn't know exactly what happened. And so that added to the complexity and added to the difficulty in decision-making for some of us. That has to be, I think, included in the assessment of the difficulty of that last one. It wasn't just, this is what we expect and this was or was not followed, but the process of the fence permit may or may not have been followed. And I think going forward, we have a better way of ensuring that that is properly addressed. And that, if we have that at the beginning, it's much less likely for things to snowball out of control the way it kind of did.
Were there conversations around pools and
We
height?
actually did touch base briefly on pools, but we decided that each pool is so unique in every yard, that is the purpose of the variance, is to address a unique situation. So we didn't want to pigeonhole pools because of all the safety concerns. We wanted to kind of, they would have to go through the permit process to begin with. And the purpose of this, and we did not have a discussion about that previous fence, because the purpose of this was not to declare that fence without a variance need. So that previous fence, when you're speaking to, wasn't brought up in our conversations. Pools were, but we thought that due to safety reasons, that we didn't want to pigeonhole them.
Right.
We have to still go through this permit process, which is such a wonderful addition.
Which I totally get, and so that's why I think of all the questions I have, that's my most specific one, is that there was a lot of conversation in that one, and it would apply for any, that this pool being attractive nuisance, or the pool already being there, you don't want a fence so low that people will be able to see into your pool area. That we should allow it to be 6 feet tall so that people aren't allured by the attractive nuisance. And that will come up again, so that's something that I specifically am concerned about. So, I'm gonna have a hard time supporting this unless we have some resolution about that.
Pools?
Pardon?
Specific wording about pools?
Yeah, well, about a pool, and if you have a pool in a side yard and they have a 4-foot fence, is that an attractive nuisance, and should we allow a 6-foot fence? And in full clarification and clarity.
You're very interested.
I'm very interested personally, and I said that from the beginning, I tried so hard to stay out of this for so long, but we're getting real close where my fence is gonna fall down. And so it's just something, and so it isn't unique, because somebody's gonna have to address this. So I need to have some clarification on that, so that it's not looking like I am going out and, asking for something special. I just wanna make sure that we. And I know I'm not the only person in the world either, because I know there are other people that have said to me, I kind of have that problem too. All right.
So as a general fit, it might be a more generic problem than specific. I mean, I agree, we
yes.
do have a various process for reason to fronts, I think.
Right.
It's a very good point to bring up, but I think it sounds like there might be.
And so if somebody had to
Few
go
more
for a
instances.
variance, and they said it's because
So-
of this attractive nuisance, it would be
Yeah.
nice to say, so we actually talked about that, and that's part of it.
I wonder if a good action item for, as part, whether or not it's part of this process, and we do introduce, or we don't introduce, to continue to get some, sorry guys, some more feedback from staff here to try to get a sense of how general, I mean, you know, can we get a sense of there's X number of pools and there's X number within, you know, so many feet. I don't want to make a massive
There's a
project.
huge variety out there, and fences and pools have been constructed in this community from the beginning, yeah, so I think the variation is substantial enough that you're not gonna come into one, you know, hey, look, this is gonna get 90% of them or something like that. I think you have to, your job as a commission is to come down, what you're gonna come up with a consensus on, you know, on.
We're always trying to get to 80-90 with the ordinance, and we realize there's gonna be a, you know, 10% of the overall, I guess, community that we're gonna have to address, and I guess that was trying to get a sense of.
And we're discussion, was in the street side yards in the 4-foot fence. That was really more to align somebody who is, I mean, beyond that, those are pretty common out there, and we get a lot of requests for those. That was also to just align somebody who would need that to meet the minimum requirement, the building code for pools. So otherwise, they have to come in for a variance in order to be compliant with the state building code. We felt it was best to, at least on that particular issue, make sure that it just aligned with that.
All right, and I guess back to, maybe this way that was on the infrastructure committee, maybe talk a little bit more about any conversation that happened on, I guess, grandfather, for lack of a better expression as well. I think that was a point that had kind of come up, and once again, we certainly have seen plenty of pictures to know that there's too many fences out there. So I just wanted to get some insight and, you know, just a little more detail. I'm not looking for a perfect answer, I'm just looking for to understand.
So I'm not really sure what you mean by grandfathering, so just giving everybody a pass that has a non-existent, because don't they have to go through a process? If a neighbor is not happy with the neighbor's fence, they would have to go through a process,
Yeah,
right?
no, I'm talking more along the lines of somebody says, hey, my fence is not in compliance with the ordinance as we stand today. And yeah, I want to simply replace the fence that's there today. We have a fence process, they would come to staff would say, your fence is not in compliance with the ordinance as of today, you'd have to go through a variance process.
Or I think that's where we tied into
The 25%.
25% of the repaired maintenance.
Agreed, but they say, no, I want to do the whole thing.
Then
Or you
then you
can't.
can't.
Okay, and I just want to be clear, we're okay saying that.
That's why we put it in.
And
Unless-
that's why we came up with the 25%, because
25%
as Alec noted,
would be-
that's a question we get, is what's
It could be
maintenance?
25%.
Is it 50%, is it, you know, everyone's got their own idea, so
Yeah.
we wanted to codify, and that's where the committee actually ended up.
There was like an unsubstantiated feeling out there, I think we discussed this, that it was 50%, for some reason this magic number was 15%.
Right,
because it was
really
there.
never, yeah.
It was really never exactly, so we thought that it would really deter a lot of that if we greatly lowered that percentage, so we thought 25% is probably.
And if I recall, we also, they also landed on a 12-month time frame also, because the next question someone has is, how long do I have? Yeah, right. So if someone's trying to game the ordinance, I mean, they have to be very committed over a, you know, at least a 4-year period
Period.
to get 4 fence permits to, you know. So those are some of the discussions that took place with respect to.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate that. I think that's a good solution. I'm very thankful I came out of that committee there. So, and I guess, you know, coming back to this, you know, subpoint D, and if applicable, variance would significantly bring a non-conforming fence closer to conformity with this chapter, right? Remember, the word significantly had to be an issue when being overturning the staff decision. So if somebody moves back, you know, they're right up on the line, but they moved it back 5 feet. You know, we're saying, well, that's significant, so they should be allowed to, that's justification for us to grant a variance, is what this ordinance would say, is the commission would have, at that point in time, would say, that's a point we can point to and say, we're okay with that. Correct. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah. To the ordinance. I think
Let's say all,
Right.
all
Just
of the
want to make sure we all know what we're voting for on this, so.
Yeah, and to Kelly just made a good point, it says all. What you just were saying.
Correct, yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Every
you
one
need
of those
one of
things
five,
would have to
yeah.
be met.
And maybe this is a question for you, Mr. Up, were you involved in drafting that language there for the variance conditions and that new 8.62D? Did that come from you, or did that?
Well, Alex did the drafting, but I reviewed everything that he did.
Okay.
And how did he, stepping, I think we all understand what that D is trying to get to, at least. The rest of that language, I haven't gone back and compared it against what our because before we used to link to the zoning variance standards. And so at first blush, it looks like some of the other wording might be just a little bit different from what our zoning variance language is as well. Can you
Yeah,
speak to that at all?
there's slight differences, as Alex pointed out, there is in the other ordinance where we put this language in. I think you use that as a pattern as well, to try and tailor it to what the object was we were dealing with. You were dealing with fences, and so that's different than dealing with houses.
So it's the same concepts that we have from the zoning ordinance, but obviously, for example, our zoning ordinance doesn't specifically speak to clear vision as a
Correct.
hazard, and so we bring that in specifically here.
Right.
Kind of
Here it
trying to
is.
mirror those same standards.
Any more questions? Great. Thank you. So tonight is an introduction, and so may I please have a motion for number 11?
Move to introduce the ordinance to amend Article 1 of Chapter 83 of Title 8 of the City Code regarding general fence requirements.
Support?
Support.
Thank you. Any more conversation? This is an introduction. Okay, all those in favor, please say yes.
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 Those opposed, say no. It's introduced. May I please have a motion for agenda item 12?
Sure. An introduction of an ordinance to amend section 3.38 of chapter 32, title 3 of the city code pertaining to private trees pertaining to private trees and shrubs.
Support.
Any more conversation? Questions? All those in favor, please say yes. Yes. Opposed, say no. Passes. All right, Doug, you are going to give us agenda item 15, proposal to continue parking restrictions on Gladstone.
Correct. If the commission will recall, last year around this time, there was a approval for parking restrictions on Gladstone, on the east side of Gladstone, between Walton Street, Robinson Road. And the commission approved a 12-month or till July. We give it a year to get some feedback from residents of that street. So this past month, we sent out ballots back out to residents of the street. The total of 29 letters were sent, or notices were sent. We received 13 responses, 11 approved, there were 0 that were opposed, and we had 2 other. The other were to go to odd even parking. I included the mailing list and then all the comments for you in the materials, so you can see that direct feedback from residents along that street. If the city commission is to approve this evening, if there beyond the public comment that there may be, residents still could in the future utilize our petition process to make changes. So this is more to move forward or not with those parking restrictions that were approved last year. Again, noting that residents could, there's individual or individuals who feel strongly for a different option that's not presented. They could utilize the petition process and that change in the future.
So we request that there are greater than 50%, 51% or more, and we didn't get that big of a response.
Right. This is a little bit unusual because if you recall the history of this actually predates my time here at the city. There was some sort of a pilot project where some 2-hour parking was done, and those signs were hooded for some period of time, and it was brought to our attention from staff, and we wanted to take a look at different restrictions. So in this case, it was initiated more by the city to engage the residents of that street. We had done a couple different surveys to the residents to kind of come up with the top things they're looking at. And those are the 3 that are basically illustrated here, was to look at permanent parking restrictions on one side of the road. The east side was chosen because that's where the fire hydrants are, and you can't park within 30 feet of a fire hydrant, so it already had the most restrictive amount of space on that side, east side of the street. And then also we'll recall that, as was noted here from the responses from this time around, the other interest in parking restrictions was the odd even, which we have a little bit of everything in East Grand Rapids. There's not a one size fits all. So it looks like we didn't get a majority of votes. compared to the number of notices that were sent out, but certainly the responses we received, it appears that they're certainly not opposed, and it appears that at least the larger amounts of ballots that were submitted were to approve or leave in place what's existing. Again, I would just note that if the residents have another option aside noted here, or they want to move forward with the pursuing odd even parking, they certainly could do so through our petition process.
Thank you. Okay, this one, is this an introduction, or is this is an introduction? Okay. So we haven't
No,
taken.
This would not be an introduction, sorry.
Oh, you were introducing, this is a real one.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yep.
yep, there we go. So, for this one, I did not have public comment on the others. We'll have public comment next time we do these, so I probably could have done it this time. But for this particular one, we're being asked to vote on this tonight, so I am going to open public comment. If anyone's here to speak to this agenda item, the parking on Gladstone, now would be the time to come forward and make your comments. Some people here might be from Gladstone. All right. Seeing nobody coming forward?
I'm from Gladstone.
We don't have to comment if you don't want to. I'm not forcing you. Okay.
proposal.
Okay. Mayor forces residents to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, then I will close public comments and bring it up here and ask for a motion.
Motion to approve the proposal to continue parking restrictions on Gladstone. Is that what I was?
Is there support? Thank you. Comments? Anybody?
I would say one thing.
I'm sorry, no, too late, sorry, we have to go according to Robert's Rules of Order.
I'll just keep it short and simple. We got 11 approves. It sounds like it's the right way to go. This was kind of controversial and kind of and necessary, and it's easy to.
Normally I'd have maybe a tiny bit of pause for moving forward without a majority of responses, but the fact that there is not a single person who's spoken in opposition makes me comfortable with it under these circumstances, so I support this as well.
I did, okay, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
I'm in complete agreement too. Normally I might take a little bit of pause, but I think since everybody was strongly in favor of it, and it is summer, so I know probably none of the responses didn't come in because people just got busy. So, yeah, I think this as well.
So I went through the responses one by one, the previous and the new ones, and of the current one, there were 3 people who voted no last time that didn't vote at all this time. But then there were 2 people that voted no last time that voted yes this time. So I feel like we're making a change. And then there was 1 person who voted yes last time who didn't vote at all. So I have the same hesitancy because we didn't have the full number voting. However, as Mr. LaFave said, if we go forward with this and 6 months, a year from now, people say, hey, if something's not working, we'd like to adjust this, we have the capability to do so. This is never written in stone. And I also would like to mention that I think that ultimately, we are gonna have to look at this whole area more in depth. We have other shoes to drop, so to speak, seeing what happens with some of the other parking issues at Blodgett. But we have, what will happen is that a lot of times what we do with one street will end up moving the problem to another street. And I know that several of the streets in that area are all concerned about the additional parking of Blodgett employees and the Aquinas students. And so if one street gets restrictions, it's going to very easily fall to another street. So I think that we really need to eventually take a comprehensive view of this, but I understand that doing it now might not be the best time because Blodgett is in flux. But ultimately, I really do think we should look a big picture of this. We've talked about perhaps doing permitted parking. And again, that would be something we could look at. We'd have to have a lot of conversation with the neighbors. But also if we have permitted parking on 3 streets, well then the other 5 streets are gonna get twice as many. So I just, going forward, I think that we will have a time that we need to look at this and get input from the residents and maybe make a better overall view of this, because it's more than just this street. It's really kind of all that out there. Okay, any other comments? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, I believe, is the consent agenda. May I please have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Support.
Comments? I did want to mention on here the water lining contract. Once again, I just want to commend our Public Works for using this cured-in-place water pipe, which saves the residents a lot of money instead of having to dig up all of our water pipes. This is a new, fairly new process that we have employed, and I thank you for doing this to use our tax dollars efficiently and keep our water safe and potable. Thank you very much. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Okay, thank you. And then Doug, we have our final agenda item. You're just going to make some presentation of goals and objectives.
Correct. Each one of the departments is going to go through some of our, each year we have goals and objectives as part of the budget process. And this is just an update of where we're at with some of those goals for each department. So we have a brief PowerPoint presentation that just gives the headings, and then each department will go up and kind of give an update of where they're at with some of those goals.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And sometimes my head spins at how much we're doing simultaneously. So thank you. Get off.
Finance departments.
Didn't know what order it was in, so I had to wait to see. And so I just took a couple of the goals from the book. I know before I've talked about a lot of our technology updates that we're working on. I'm just going to pick different ones each time just because we are working on a lot of different things all at the same time. These couple of things are ones that are just more prevalent right this second. So we're updating the employee handbook. I've reviewed it once. I'm in the process of reviewing it a second time. It still needs to go to like our labor attorneys and stuff, but that is something we're hoping to get to you guys, hopefully still within this fiscal year of 2020. I know it seems like a long time, but our handbook is just a lot of little details of
It's the video.
Here, Karen.
Yeah, it's the video.
I was like, I hear myself.
It's playing back.
Yeah. So it does take time to go through all the different benefits. The last time I was updated was over 10 years ago, and so a lot of laws have changed, and a lot of different things have changed. And so just trying to go through it with a fine tooth comb before we turn it over to the labor attorney. The health benefit study, they have completed the study portion of it. They're going to come out in a couple of weeks and go over it with HR, Doug and myself, and we're going to just go through it, kind of see where we're at on that, and then we're going to start the proposal process just to look at our administrator on our health benefit side. They won't even just look at healthcare too, they'll look at our long-term disability, they'll look at our life insurance, they'll look at all our different health benefits. And then just because, we're at year end, I just wanted to give an update on our year end results, just because that's something, even though it's not really in the goal book, I know it's dear to everybody's heart. We had, a lot of tough budget cuts and everything else. So I just wanted to let you know, we've got most of our expenditures in. I've talked to each department. I don't expect anything significant still to come in. I know we have some revenue stuff that we have to build and such. But just on the expenditure side, I think we're going to end up, closer to like a 96 or 97% of the budget being spent. We're typically closer to a 97 or 98%. That could mean a difference of a couple $100,000 that we weren't, necessarily expecting. So I always say we don't spend all of our budget because we can't spend right up to it, but we look like we're doing a little bit better. Some of those reasons are, we do have a city manager vacancy. Well, we took some of that out. At that time, I didn't take it all out because I didn't really know what we were doing. So we had some cost savings there. We do have some smaller projects that are going to get postponed to 2020. So you'll see budget amendments for those. But overall, we are ending up in a really good spot where we thought we were going to. And a lot of these things we couldn't predict at the time. But we do need to remember we did make a lot of one-time only budget cuts to get that. Like we didn't fund the fire truck, we didn't fund some of the healthcare. So we did take some things out of there, and we're not planning to put those back in. This will just give us a head start on looking at 2020 and 2021 as we work through those. So I want to let you know that it appears we're gonna end up better than we were hoping, and so I just wanted to pass that on as part of it.
Clarify the healthcare, we didn't get rid of healthcare.
No, I meant fund the full amount that we should, yes, yeah. Yeah.
That is really good news. Thank you very much. And really, we speak for all of the taxpayers because that's one of our primary jobs here is to make sure that we're spending the money wisely. So thank you very much for having such a great report for us. Working so hard. Thank you.
Next is public safety.
All right, good evening again. I'm going to talk to you about two things that we've had in our goals and objectives. The first one is the accreditation process, and this started in 2017, and each year I mention this, but within the next, hopefully 5 months, we will be through this process. 2 years ago, the state of Michigan decided that law enforcement agencies in the state of Michigan should have some kind of accreditation where somebody from outside the organization says, hey, your department is meeting basic minimum standards of what a good law enforcement agency should be in the state of Michigan. So there's 105 standards ranging from investigation, control, finance, those types of things that the department has to meet. And out of those 105 standards, we now have 150 procedures that we developed to cover those 105 standards. So we're done with the procedure writing process. We're also done with the proofs of compliance process. And basically, a proof is anything that proves we're abiding by what is in our policies and procedures. So our next step is we're going to contact an assessor from the state of Michigan who will come in and he'll conduct a mock assessment, basically saying, hey, you're really good here, you might need to change these things. Once we get done with the mock assessment, then we can have the full assessment, and then once we complete that, we'll be accredited in the state of Michigan. So we're about 96% of the way there. So we just have to get through those two final pieces, the mock assessment and then the final assessment, and then I'll be able to come to you with some fancy certificate that says we're certified in the state of Michigan. But this is really a good thing, you know. There's 600 law enforcement agencies, like I mentioned earlier, in the state of Michigan. I think right now about 30 to 40 are either accredited or in the process. So we're on the leading edge of that, and hopefully we'll be done with that soon.
Chief, just getting accredited, besides just being a good, symbol of that we have best practices in place, does that open up any opportunities for grants or training or other things that we might not otherwise be entitled to, or not necessarily?
No, not in that vein. It's pretty much just a standard of you met the minimum requirements, for being a good law enforcement agency in the state of Michigan. There may be some insurance benefits to that for some cities, depending on how they do insurance, but that's something I can look into.
And I want to mention that it's, these types of accreditation, there are so many balls you have to keep in the air, so many things you have to look at, and a lot of times you think, well, that's probably okay. This forces you to look at each piece and make sure you're in compliance. So this is a big project, and I appreciate the fact that you've gone through and you've done this, and it will be one of a small percentage of communities that we've done so far.
And just so you know, all 150 procedures, every officer, including the chief, has taken a test on those. So if you guys want to go through that process, you're more than willing to go through it. But so our officers are up to speed on the policies and procedures as well. Then the other one that I want to talk about is we've kind of talked about this in the past, and we're moving forward on it, is a dual trained employee program with the Public Works Department. And this is something we're in the initial stages of looking at. Currently in our Public Works Department right now, we have one individual who's a firefighter. He works for another city as a part-time firefighter. As you know, when we have fires, you need bodies. Now, thankfully, we don't have many fires. But this would be a good utilization of resources, and what we want to try and do is see if we can supplant our regular public safety officers with some additional help at fire scenes. Now, what you may not realize is a good example to use is a fire that we had this winter on Northeast Street. Our Public Works Department personnel were there assisting us because they're very good with understanding pressure and all those kinds of things with the water flow. But we have one individual who's very interested in this, so we want to take a look at this type of program to see if there's a benefit for our community. Now, cities such as Wyoming and Rockford have done this, and it's worked quite well. So it would be just a part-time kind of a thing, but we have people within the city who have some unique skills, and we want to tap into that. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we're kind of taking a look at it right now as something that we think would be very positive for the community.
Yeah, I think just to chime in a little bit, so basically, we've basically just been at the conversation stage at this point. We have not approached any of our bargaining units officially, which we will have to do. But we're really looking, compared to some of the others that are out there, as Chief Harold noted, we're really looking at it in terms of not to how we count personnel for fire responses, but more to, as he noted, supplement or augment our forces. So I guess another way to put it would be if we have any individuals who are certified firefighters in public works, if they're at work that day and they're not on a task that they can't leave, like for example, if they're on an excavation for a water valve repair, they're not going to leave that excavation to go to that fire, but let's say they're on the yard waste crew that day, they certainly can respond. So we're looking at it as more of an augmentation and just a different way of looking at doing business, as we're always looking at continual process program improvements.
Great. Thank you. Next up.
And then next will be Public Works. I got a couple handouts. I'll send a couple that way. And where else is that? So as you recall, a couple of years ago, we did change the sequencing for our street projects. We really wanted to try to get into doing as much work as we could in the springtime and get things wrapped up by June 30th. So we're not competing in the competitive bid environment with some of the larger municipalities here in the Grand Rapids metro region. And that's actually one of our WIG goals too. So as you'll note, I'll go over our measurement for asset management ratings. We use the PASER system, which we do each year when we've completed all of our projects. So we'll be working with the Grand Valley Metro Council to have their van that comes and measures rutting, cracking. There's a whole list of different metrics that are utilized to rate each one of our streets. We do that in the fall so that we have completed all that work, and then we use that as a basis for refining our capital improvement plan for the spring. Sometimes based on preventive maintenance, we might do like crack sealing, those types of things. We may increase a road's rating just slightly to, from a PASER 5 to a 6, for example. So some streets may increase their rating, while others sometimes will skip even 2 ratings from one winter season. So each street is different in the city. So each year we refine our capital improvement plan for springtime based off of those ratings going forward. This last year, we measured our progress towards our goal of 2025 from the streets and sidewalk millage. Our goal is to have 70% of our streets rated in, from a PASER 5 to a 10, so that's a good and fair on up. So that's 70%. What we hit this last fall when everything was measured to PASER was 56%. So I know we've got a chart. I could throw it up real quick. Flip over to No, it was kind of I know everyone likes to look at charts and stuff, so this is a last second addition. So, and then I just noted, so you can see there, the blue chart was our projection without the additional millage funds, and the green line is what our goal is, and so red is currently where we're at as of this last fall. We will have an update here, probably I'm going to guess in October, where we'll be able to see what streets. It'll all flesh out, like I said. Some will go down, some will go up. I just wanted to highlight for fiscal year ending June 30, just of the 3 pervasive capital-related treatments. So our mill and overlay streets, we did 1.96, almost 2 miles worth of streets here this spring. Cape seal, which is the next step down from that, which is a preventive maintenance on a street that still has a good PASER rating. We did almost 3 miles. And then microsurfacing, that is a treatment on a street that is even higher. So we did approximately 3.5 miles. So total about 8.4 miles of work we did this spring, ending June 30. And I know everyone felt it in the community. You couldn't go too far without
running into this, but it's really about hitting those streets that are those lower pacers to address those, and we always want to tie those to our utility projects when we can. But we also need to take care, make sure that once we pave a street, we don't just come back in 10 or 15 years and just let it go. So we need to make sure that we're following asset management principles to make those investments, which cost significantly less, to make sure that we're making those investments wisely with the village dollars. Next, I just wanted to touch into, as the goal slide noted, particularly I want to focus on water main projects. That was on the agenda this evening. And just to kind of rehash some of the big points of our continued investment in our utility infrastructure too. We have 53 miles of water main in the city, and with approximately $960,000 total, we're investing in about a mile's worth of pipe rehabilitation later this summer and into the fall. And just to give you an idea how much that moves the needle, that moves for asset management rating from a 5 to a 1. So a 5 are water mains that, based off of their age, what material they're made of, and our maintenance issues. Those would all be, we've classified those, and you've all seen the map on that, red. We've got a significant portion, about half of our system is in that 5 rating. Those will be moving up to a 1, so that moves the needle about 1.8% for us system-wide. So that's what will be achieved this fall with that list. So I just wanted to kind of point those out to you all. And this is just I'll just throw this up since it's here. This is just a map illustration of all the work that we were able to get accomplished this spring throughout the city, and it's just color-coded to the different treatments and what they were. Any questions on Public Works?
I just want to say that on the Wealthy Street and Lake Drive, although at the time people are like, what's going on here? It certainly is nice now. It really does look good, and it had gotten pretty rough, and so this is a good, I call it, you've resold the shoe instead of buying a completely new pair of shoes. And I think that this is great. It's a great improvement. It'll get us a few more years use out of this at a low price, low, relatively speaking. Great. Thank you.
Parks and Rec.
There you go. You're there.
All right, an update on our community park, recreation, open space, and greenway plan. Just to bring you up to speed, we had our survey go out to the community, 536 respondents, which is really a tremendous turnout, nearly 11% of our community answering the questions and leaving 8 pages of comments in total that we have reviewed as part of our process. We've also hosted 2 of our public workshops. So we had a workshop in June, another workshop in July, collecting again comments, going through the concepts, the goals and objectives, as well as our capital improvement plan, which is all part of the overall document that will ultimately be submitted to the state. So right now, I just have a final draft of the plan that I'm reviewing for a meeting tomorrow, with some minor corrections that I have found in the 217-page document that we have together so far. What that brings us to is next Monday on the 12th, the draft plan will go before the Parks and Rec Commission. There will be public comment at that time as well for more public input. And the hope is that the Parks and Rec Commission will approve that final draft, recommending adoption by the City Commission at a later date. Following the Parks and Rec Commission meeting on the 12th, we'll make any tweaks if there are any amendments to that plan during that meeting. We will then put those amendments in and have a draft available for a minimum of 30 days. That's a state requirement. So once again, the community will have a chance to look at that plan as a whole document. We'll have hard copies available at the library, City Hall, and at the Parks and Rec Department, as well as on the city's website. Just so you know, the document I have right now is 147 megabytes, so to send that out is more difficult, but we'll have it available on the website for people to view. After that 30-day process, it will come to you, the City Commission, for final approval and adoption as part of the resolution. At that time, you'll also have a public hearing to take, once again, public comments prior to your approval. Once the City Commission approves the document, it will then move on to the state. We'll be on file for 5 years, and that will allow us to apply for grants. So the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and the Passport Grant Program. So that's really a bonus for us. But this will be an ultimate blueprint for our community on where we're heading in regards to parks and recreations and the needs and wants of our community. So any questions on that goal?
just want to make a comment that being part of the process on the Parks and Recreation Commission, it was so nice to see all the public input. A lot of people came to the public meetings and the workshops. I think it was great.
Good.
It was exciting to see.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, please, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that our process is a little more broad and open than some other communities, so having those workshops, giving those opportunities, quite often, it simply goes to the city commission with a public hearing and an adoption. So we give multiple opportunities for our community to be involved.
Which is fantastic. I'm really pleased about that. Can you remind us with the timing of like the grant application process? I seem to remember when we were talking about the overall timeline for putting this plan together, that there was a timing of when the grant cycle usually happens, and does that bear any relevance on when we would want to adopt that plan? Because it runs for 5 years from when we adopt it, and so if you adopt it right after the last grant cycle was done, you've kind of adopted it almost too early. I don't know if there's any timing issues at all that we need to be aware of or not.
Yeah, so the timing is such that that's why we started the process now. We thought we were in a position moving forward that some of these projects could move forward. And just remember, this is a blueprint, so once these documents are on file with the state, that if we wanted to take any of our concept plans and actually put those into action, regardless if we're applying for a grant or not, or have the funding available internally or other sources, that we can move forward. Because many of our properties actually have grants already attached to them. So if we submit the plan and they're showing changes to various properties, may that be Manhattan or Phase 2 for Waterfront Park, once they approve that document, then that means the concept plans in whole are supported by the state at the DNR level, even though those are already grant projects. So my point is, Manhattan was developed with grant dollars years ago. So for us to make any changes there, we want to have that in the plan. Maybe we get a grant or not to move forward with those potential changes. So if there's a destination playground, splash pad, additional restroom, if it's approved in this document by the state, we can simply move forward with that project. The timing for grants is typically, they moved it up. So March 1, I believe, is now the new date. It used to be April. You apply for your grant. It'll go through the grant review process and scoring. And you usually will know if you're going to be awarded a grant that December. So again, we could apply as early as this coming March if we so chose to feel we were in a position financially and had a high priority project we wanted to apply for. That would be our earliest opportunity to apply for a grant. But again, this plan is good for 5 years. Any other questions? Our second project, so thank you tonight on the consent agenda, you actually approved our Z Sprayer Max spreader, which will allow us to bring in-house our pesticide application process with our grounds team. So this piece of equipment will no longer be necessary by our contractual lawn maintenance, who quite often subcontracts that work out, and unfortunately allows a little control on our part. So if we have rain or wind, that gets backed up, and then they can't get back in time, and there are very strict state rules in regards to school properties. So as you know, grounds maintenance, we handle city and school properties. So this piece of equipment will allow us to do that in-house with our team. So thank you for that. The other nice and exciting news I have for you is we have been awarded a grant from Stonyfield. So it's a $5,000 grant, and we are moving forward, and that's allowing us to look at 4 properties at this time. I'm still going back and forth with Stonyfield, depending on what this $5,000 will fund. We're going to work towards moving those grass turf surfaces to organic pesticide management. So trying to get away from synthetic. In essence, to be safer is the intent. I will say though, that the transition time takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years, because what you're trying to do is take the soil that's in poor condition and use the proper organic materials to make that soil very healthy to grow grass, to then outcompete your weeds and other things that you're trying to control with synthetic pesticides. So in short, that's what this program is going to be about. We actually have a community event hosted by Stonyfield on September 21st over at Wealthy Elementary. Yes, there will be free Stonyfield yogurt available, and games and education for all the families and kids that may want to attend. And we'll be promoting that community-wide. And that is fully funded and supported by Stonyfield for that community event day. They will also pay for the signs that will be at the locations where we'll be working on those turf fields. So right now it's Wealthy Elementary, John Collins Park. The other 2 we had slated was middle school back and Manhattan Park, the large soccer, lacrosse, athletic field. So those are our 4 components. Right now, we're going back and forth on what they're gonna actually fund, because they actually bring in Chip Osborne with Osborne Organics, they fly him in. We will do soil testing on all those sites, that will go out to a lab, that will come back, he will provide us with a very extensive report on those soil conditions and a plan to manage those sites, meaning what organic materials do we need based on that soil test to convert and transition those fields to organic, healthy fields. So that's, in short, the program that's gonna be before us, and working closer to Stonyfield and IPM, which is out of Chicago. And this also started with, just so you know, Growing Green Grand Rapids. So we had some connections with our next door neighbors, Grand Rapids, and they helped us apply for this grant, because they were also pushing for that, another grant in Grand Rapids, and I do believe that is being awarded as well. So we kind of have this connection with Stonyfield in our 2 communities. So any questions on those 2 goals?
Fred, so that includes any and all fields of use in the school system or greater East Grand Rapids area?
No,
Oh, it is not.
just the 4 that I mentioned right now. This is a pilot program. One, we want to make sure it actually
Just those 4?
works.
Okay.
That's correct. So this $5,000 grant, we are committing for 1 full year minimum, and they expect we'll take the time, 2 to 3 years, to totally transition and see the impact and have those healthy fields. And just know that Chip Osborne not only comes out this first time, but he comes out a year later, goes to all those sites and works with our grounds team, trains them how to implement the program.
Got it, thank you.
It's very cool as Stonyfield to recognize that you get people learning a new way, and then it's easier to do the overall transition. If it was just us saying, hey, Fred, do this, you'd be like, where do I start?
We just don't have that knowledge or background.
Yeah.
So Chip Osborne, Osborne Organics is a huge player in making this happen and to have success. The other part is you will see signs, and just so you know, they're educational in nature. They're like 5 steps and tells you what we're trying to do at each of those sites. Those are funded by Stonyfield. They will have the city and school logos on them with the other partners and be educational. And those will be in place for up to 1 year. So you will see those on our locations, don't be surprised.
Very cool. Thank you.
We have the city manager's office, so.
That's right, that's right.
So Karen and John, if you wanna.
Sure. I'm going to stay here since John's right here. So we have been working on recodifying the city code of ordinances. It was last done in 2006, and we had like 125 amendments that needed to be included in our new book. So that contract was awarded last June, and then there was a flurry of activity from everyone on updating all of their ordinances before we got started. So I wasn't able to send everything into a codifier until January of 2019. In April, we received a draft. Alec is really excited about this. John and I have already looked through it. As you can see, we've made some notes on things that they either small typographical errors or things that we want to look into a little bit further. We're waiting on what's called a legal review. So they should be sending us within about 2 weeks, they say, a complete list of everything that they have found after going through it with a fine-tooth comb, everything that they have found that we need to take a look at. Either we messed up and we renumbered some sections that shouldn't have been renumbered, or we overwrote a section that we shouldn't have, or maybe something conflicts with state law. We've done something that they say, well, were you aware there's a new state law since you did this? So they will send us a legal review. John and I think we probably have about 2 months worth of work to do there. So we will be going back through everything and looking at all of their questions, researching. It may require some additional amendments to come back to you to fix some of the things that they found. But we're hoping that we're still on track to get this done and up on the website and new books and everything by the end of 2019. So maybe a little ambitious, but that's still what we're trying to do. So, and after that, every time the city commission adopts a new ordinance, I will send it in the day after it's adopted. And within 2 weeks, it should be up on the website in its correct form, available for everybody from staff here in the office to residents. Officers in their cars can look up what's the most current ordinance. Zoning administrator, when he's out on the road, can use mobile app. So we're really excited to get this finished.
And
Now going to tackle master plan implementation
Okay.
here.
Yep.
So I'm just going to go over some of the goals that we had in our goals objectives booklet from the budget process this year. I'll start with our mobility study. So this gets into the pedestrian safety aspect of things. We've discussed this at, I think, 2 infrastructure meetings, and we're working on putting together an RFP to get that public engagement process started. So we'll look at getting RFP out to consultants and review those, have those come back in, and then we'll have a public engagement process to look at various things. In particular, I think the main goal that we're trying to look at is with respect to whether you call it a mobility study or a bike action plan, but we're trying to look at our infrastructure as it's related to bicycle safety and what types of changes we can make in East Grand Rapids in the short term and then the long term. So that's something that we've been working on, and we'll be getting an RFP back to the infrastructure committee here probably at our next meeting, which is not scheduled at this point in time. The next goal with respect to the master plan that we had for this year was to implement wayfinding signage system for Gaslight Village. So we worked, staff, consultants worked with our infrastructure committee. Then we brought that forward to the city commission for approval, and we ordered the new signs for I think there's 5 new locations throughout the city. So we select the infrastructure committee and city commission, if you'll remember, we looked at different locations for those signs and what the signs actually look like. So we had, as of 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago, received shipment of the signs, and so we'll be marking the digs in the right of way at the locations, and public works staff will be installing those, I'd say, over the next 3 or 4 weeks, and that will be completed. I should go back to the previous goal. That was a 3 to 5 year goal master plan, but given the desire, I think, from the community and from you all's elected officials, that was one that we wanted to get started with earlier than 1 to 3, or earlier in the 1 to 3 period instead of the 3 to 5 year. The wayfinding signage was also the 3 to 5 year, and that was something that, given desire from our business community and you all as elected officials, that we kind of got a jump on that one as well. The next goal, which we went through this evening, was updating the zoning code to look at the table of uses for C1 commercial district and definition of retail, and looking specifically with respect to activated storefronts and high pedestrian usage in our business district. So we've worked through 3 planning commission meetings and just had the introduction this evening to you all as we work forward towards implementing that goal. That goal was in the 1 to 3 year period. And then we wanted to look at, the other goal that we had was to look at our redevelopment ready process with MEDC. That has not moved since the last time we gave an update. That is currently at MEDC awaiting their review. They'll give us a status report, then we'll bring that back to you, and whether we have to go through planning commission or go some of those recommendations directly for the city commission's consideration, we'll do that at that time.
We've completed our portion of it, it's up, they have the next move.
Correct.
Right.
And there's not a, I think when we've checked in with them, there's not we're not a set timeline like, hey, we're gonna have it 60 days or so. It's out there, our work, which is mostly, I think, all completed by Zone Administrator Alec Mizikar, is all submitted to them. Then the other goal that we had that was in the short term, which we just completed, was when we did the parking study component of the master plan, it was to look at better efficiencies and utilization of existing on-street parking resources that we have adjacent to the business district. In particular, the recommendation was to look at Lakeside Drive from Ridgeway Boulevard to Lake Drive. And we went through the process with the infrastructure committee and city commission, as you recall, and then recently completed marking all those spots. We're wrapping up some of the sign changes out there, The net change overall between some added spots and efficiencies is approximately 20 spaces along that stretch there. And again, that's just to eliminate when you have someone who's got a moped or a motorcycle taking up a lot, or a vehicle that, gee, if it was just if they would have left a few more inches, you could have fit another car there. So by having it defined like we do at Walthy Street and Gaslight, to improve that efficiency and make that, create more spaces for our residents and visitors in the business district. Those are the updated goals of the master plan implementation.
Good work. Man, that's a lot considering we approved it less than a year ago, right? In September. So really good work by city staff and our commission here, helping with our various committees, so thank you. Two things I did want to mention real quickly before we leave, and one is we did receive the 2018 annual report of the Kent County Dispatch Authority, and I just wanted to mention we got 2 of the 4 officers on the front. I don't know if these are like our models, and so glad that we're overrepresented. I love that. It's a nice photo. And I also wanted to mention, I know we have at least one scout in the audience, and we always love to have our scouts here. I do a lot of work with the scouts when they come in as a group, but we also know that part of their requirements are to have some exposure to city commission. I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards if you have any questions about this very long meeting that you've attended. So periodically we do have scouts in the audience, and I have nothing but the utmost respect and admiration for our Boy Scouts and our Girl Scouts, and I think East Grand Rapids is lucky to have a very healthy program with a lot of participation, and I want to see that continue on for many years. So great. Okay, if there's nothing else, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.